Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Not Content Podcast. On this podcast, we pour from the seemingly endless queue of movies, television shows, and maybe even other surprises along the way as part of our podcast channel From the Queue. Please subscribe, like, and review From the Queue on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform, especially Spotify and Apple, as you can get those algorithms going with positive feedback. You can find us on BlueSky at From the Queue. You can find us through Instagram at From the Queue as well as Threads. If you're listening to us on YouTube, all of our links will be in the description below. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Instagram at Jerome Cuson. You can find me on BlueSky at Jerome C1985. My co-host is Brian. You can find him on Twitter for now at Brian DeBray.
We're reaching the seventh inning stretch, and we finally hit the most popular baseball movie year ever, 1994. During this year, 5 baseball films were theatrically released, all with major names attached to them. Yet, despite baseball's popularity at the time, the worst thing possible happened. The MLB players' strike in August of 1994. And since this point in time, we've had less baseball movies produced than ever before.
Hello, Tribe fans. Welcome back to Major League Baseball. Sorry.
This year, just try to outfield them. Outclass them.
Are you thinking about what you might have done differently?
No, I was mostly thinking about your legs.
Or outrun them.
You're out of here! Bring out the pumper scooper!
Major League 2. It's a swing and a hit. Rated PG. Now playing at a theater near you.
Jerome, before we got on air, you made some interesting comments about how Major League 2 is, it's not as good as the first, but is the first major release of 94 that was a baseball movie. And this is the movie we're talking about this week. And it's really interesting how monetarily wise, they spent more money, yet somehow made the same amount of money as the first, which is kind of a lesson in spending money, I guess. And they also put too much focus on Charlie Sheen because the 5-year gap in between the two movies clearly shows that A, Wesley Snipes outgrew the franchise, and B, Charlie Sheen got much more popular, but they focused too much on him and kind of really hindered on the movie quality a little bit. However, you still find this movie somehow funnier than the first, yet somehow the quality's less? I don't know. But
I think it's possible for a movie to be funnier and still not as good, because I think Major League has like a realistic aspect to it. The second one is a cartoon. That is why I make the statement that I do.
So this is almost like a Gremlins 1 and 2 situation, right? Because and I say that because
in a lot of ways I would say yes. I mean, I think Gremlins 2 is a better movie, and then Gremlins 2 is clearly done with a different purpose in Major League 2. But yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I would say. And I think this is proof positive that sequel comedies are a mixed bag at best, and a sequel sports comedy, which this is oddly enough, there was another sequel comedy, Mighty Ducks D2. So it's just weird that we got those both in 1994 as well. A big year for sports movies in this year.
For sure. So like I said, this was the first of 5 major studio releases that would come out in 1994. So this came out March 30th. Obviously, just like the first movie, they kind of did at the beginning of the start of the season to kind of, get that baseball vibe going. And then the next couple of films were released around the summertime. Angels in the Outfield and Little Big League. Little Big League actually came out a week before Angels in the Outfield. And Angels in the Outfield had a similar box office story to Major League 2. They spent about 20-something million on their budget, got about 50 million back worldwide. Not so much for Little Big League. That was a bomb. Little Big League had a budget of, 20 million and only grossed 12. And then later in the year, we got The Scout, which Jerome goes off on because he just really hates that movie, which is why I didn't pick it, because I thought it'd be relevant for the Ohtani discussion, but we're not going to have that discussion. But the movie grossed 2.6 million worldwide on a budget of 20, which is absolutely a no-no. So that was a total bomb. And the last baseball movie to come out in 94 was Cobb. Came out in December. Budget of 25 million, only grossed 1 million, and from what I've heard, that is a terrible movie, and the people who the family of Ty Cobb really hate the movie. So that tells you a lot. And that's starring Tommy Lee Jones as Ty Cobb, and it's a very like forgettable performance for Tommy Lee Jones apparently. And that's why I've completely like overlooked this movie. And even though it's a baseball movie, I just have no interest in it based on all these things I've heard about it. So that caps off the year. But like I mentioned before, what happened in August? The baseball strike. So if this was my college thesis, so to speak, this whole project, all 9 movies, this would be my main point that leads all the other movies that leads up to this point. 1994 was like the peak year, and everything after this was like less. We had less movies produced about baseball than years prior up to this point. And I think it's because of the strike. And what happened with the strike was, I mean, baseball popularity died down a lot. And the thing that brought it back, obviously, was the home run chase between Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire. And the reason you can tell that there's a spike in interest in baseball is because if you look at like the SummerSlam that we watched, they had Abe Knuckleball Schwartz standing in the audience, complaining about the strike, which just happened because it was August in SummerSlam, right? So you have that issue, or you have that making fun of it, and then all these different things happening with like the strike and everything, and then the movie's not making money back. It just combined with all that, it just lowered the popularity of baseball, and then lowered the popularity of baseball movies. And I would say like,
And
yeah,
I would say it. I don't think it's. I think it's kind of the beginning of the end for baseball as the second most popular sport, because I think what you've seen in the last 30 years, the NFL has gradually increased its ratings lead. It's become the most ubiquitous American sport out there. You've seen basketball take away a lot of its attention. I mean, even this summer, the WNBA is taking so much attention away from Major League Baseball. And it just feels like baseball is receding more and more into the background. And I just don't know how you fix that. I mean, they certainly tried, but this is like where it start. Like this is where it really, really starts. And some people might say it was like even earlier, but to me, it's the strike. It's losing the World Series. It's their desperate attempts to make it relevant again with the home run chase. But then you get the steroid scandal, and like the statistics don't mean anything like they used to. The Hall of Fame doesn't mean what it used to. The games get longer and longer. So really, I mean, this year is very much the start of that. And it's not something like this doesn't really have a happy ending, unfortunately. Like you do get a lot of teams that do break their quote unquote curses as a part of the recovery, and that's what kind of props things up. You get the Boston Red Sox winning in 04, you get the Chicago White Sox in 05, you get the San Francisco Giants winning 3 World Series, you get the Cubs winning their World Series in 2016. But like there's nothing else to really hook people in now because so many teams have kind of conquered it. And I'm sorry, but nobody gives a crap about the Cleveland Guardians. Funny enough, ironically enough, who we're talking about in some form or fashion today. But yeah, I mean, baseball really just has never recovered for all the reasons that I just said.
and not to mention the box office returns are not what they were up to par in '94. And I know we did get obviously Moneyball, and we're going to talk about that in the ninth inning. That's like the main event because that got all the Oscar love and stuff. But it seems like since then there's been like even less produced movies since Moneyball came out, and we had 42 after that. And it still seems like if you look at the list, there's an official list on Wikipedia. It's just far and less in between. More documentaries, less actual production. So that kind of tells you where we're at. And not only that, this is the year that we're talking about that we're going to talk about in October, the baseball documentary by Ken Burns that I've seen so many clips about and so many historical clips I've seen on YouTube, and I'm going to finally watch it in full this time. But again, 1994, just something about that year and baseball just was like the beginning of the end, like Jerome said. And I mentioned that, the SummerSlam thing with Abe Knuckleball Schwartz, which is actually Brooklyn Brawler. But if you go to like 98, because I've been watching like 98 Nitros and stuff, they keep mentioning like Chicago, or if they go to Chicago, they're talking about, Sammy Sosa and the home run chase. They're talking about major home runs, and that was like the big thing in '98. So that was some of the resurgence for baseball, but it hasn't really gotten to the level it was before that, and it's unfortunate. And some teams even like suffered for it, I would say, because wouldn't you say the Expos have like just never recovered since that year, and they were on pace to win their division and go on to the World Series apparently, and they were doing so well. And then after that, they just had a shitty run, and then ended up selling the team, or not selling the team. Well, did they sell the team, or were they forced to sell the team?
I mean, I think it was bad ownership, people losing interest, and I think you're only seeing that now. I mean, in Major League Baseball right now, there are two legitimate unviable franchises, and I think a lot of it has to do with bad ownership, but I think a lot of it has to do with kind of being the second tier team in the area. I'm talking about the Oakland A's and the Chicago White Sox. I mean, these are two unviable franchises. The White Sox have set the record for the most losses in the history of professional baseball. The Oakland A's are going to be playing in the AAA stadium for the next 3 years. Maybe they will move to Las Vegas. I mean, this is part of why baseball is finding the issues that it is. And who are the household names in baseball? Shohei Ohtani is Japanese and certainly is very popular. But baseball is an American sport. If you don't have prominent Americans at the top of the heap, and again, I'm not disregarding Ohtani. I mean, certainly, I think he is an important part of the plan in terms of the international and even bringing fans out to Dodgers games. But like you are not seeing those players rise up to prominence. I mean, Mike Trout might be one of the best baseball players of all time, but like nobody knows who he is. And it's great that Aaron Judge is doing what he's doing, but like nobody cares that he's going to potentially hit 63 home runs because of everything that happened in the late 90s and the early 2000s. So when your statistics don't mean anything, when you have a lot of baseball teams that are not competitive, this is what happens. And I feel like we're very much getting off topic here, but I think this is why you're not seeing as many baseball movies being made anymore. I mean, the lack of popularity of baseball is why you're seeing Ted Lasso is a soccer movie instead, or a soccer TV show instead of a baseball TV show. Like that's how you end up with something like a Ted Lasso, and why you end up with a lot more docu-series that are focused on football and basketball, and you're not getting them about baseball nearly as much because there is a lack of interest in baseball right now. And I'm not saying it's going to die tomorrow, because regionally I think it still does have a certain amount of popularity. But when you're looking in, well, when you go to a St. Louis Cardinals game, or when you see on TV that the St. Louis Cardinals of all teams are having trouble drawing fans to their stadium, that is a very bad sign.
Yeah, and look, I respect the Cardinals. I'm not anti-Cardinal, but they were playoff rivals for years against the Dodgers. But to me, the St. Louis Cardinals are like a class. They're like a classy, franchise. And I mean, all their players are always developed well, and it's always sad to hear when I hear that, because I feel like they are really like one of the heart and souls of the MLB, the St. Louis Cardinals. And it's unfortunate. And you talked about Japanese players. This movie, Major League 2, had a Japanese player, Isiro Tanaka, and I guess at the time there were no Japanese players in the Major League. So this was kind of like ahead of its time, and it was kind of like a foretelling of what's to come in the MLB, with all the influx of Asian players, Korean players. Hideo Nomo doing that, no hitter in Denver or in Colorado, whatever, like that. This was soon after that. So this was kind of like a foretelling of what's to come in the league, and all because we obviously got the Latin players, right? And this was more of the mix with the Asian players, and this kind of showed that it was coming. And it's really interesting too, because I don't know, I've never seen a guy jump on top of the outfield wall and catch a ball. So I get it's comedy and all, but I just wish that someone actually tried that. I know that sounds nuts, but it depends on the stadium. I think maybe Dodger Stadium in the left field corner, it's possible, even though that wall is like 4 feet tall anyway. But I'm just saying, it's such an interesting concept that I've never just seen anyone try it before. And like I said, it depends on the stadium, but I've always wondered, I always wanted to see someone try to go up on a wall and catch a home run ball before it goes over. But yeah, that was a really funny scene. Despite, obviously the racist stuff going on with that character. I mean, the guy's carrying around a katana sword.
It's bad. When I talk about this movie being funnier, that is not what I am talking about. I mean, everything with him and Serrano, it's not great.
I do get a lot of not a lot, but every now and then I'll get some major league texts from my baseball friends, and eventually one of them does say the whole marbles joke, you got no marbles, and I can't help but laugh. But he was trying to help Serrano in that moment, so that's what I like about that relationship between those two, because it's this idea of spiritual peace inside, Buddha, outside, warrior. And I was just laughing my ass off. And I kept thinking, like, you know what? That's probably one of the more like philosophical, positive things you can say to any kind of sports player, because that's the kind of balance you need, I think. Because if you go too over the top with the warrior stuff, you're just gonna end up like, I don't know, Kevin Garnett. And if you find that balance, you might end up like a Tim Duncan. I know I'm like using basketball analogies here, but that's kind of how I pictured it in my mind. Also, Wesley Snipes did not reprise his role as Willie Mays Hayes. And the funny thing is that like Omar Epps is like 5 years younger than Wesley Snipes, and it's clear that he's younger, like a younger person in the second movie. So it's almost as if he like aged backwards between the two movies, even though it's supposed to be 1 year in between, or a season in between, actually. And it's just really interesting that they just make fun of him. It's like they're making fun of the fact that they know Wesley Snipes left for other bigger projects, like obviously Demolition Man had come out the year before, and they're just like making fun of it. And I can't help but think that like expanding on that Demolition Man joke, like that's why they got Jesse Ventura to come in to play that White Lightning part in the fake trailer, and do the fake trailer with Omar Epps, and do this whole thing about being an action star, doing your own stunts and jokes and stuff like that. And you can't help but think that like they're just poking fun at Wesley Snipes the whole time, because that's exactly probably what they were doing when they were writing these jokes about this character.
Yeah, I think Omar Epps does. I mean, I think he does an admirable job. I don't blame him because, when you get an opportunity like this as a 21-year-old actor, I think you have to take it. But I think the movie suffers a lot because he just doesn't have the level of chemistry. He doesn't feel like a peer of these actors like Wesley Snipes did. Like Wesley Snipes very clearly feels like he is about the same age as Charlie Sheen. And Tom Berenger is meant to be a little bit older, but it just doesn't work. Like fundamentally, that's what one of the biggest problems with it is the recasting. I really do appreciate the Thunder and Lightning and bringing in Jesse Ventura. I think that's it's a funny gag, but like it also, when you consider like they're also making fun of Wesley Snipes, like it feels kind of cheap in some ways too. But yeah, I think this is just, for me, the person that stands out the most is Bob Uecker, because I think he just goes completely unhinged. I mean, he's openly drinking liquor at games, and we get to hear Marty call a play or two, and I think his call of the big fight that the team has about halfway through the movie is some of the best line delivery, when he jokes about Rick Vaughn hanging his left a little low, the punching of the mascot. Eventually, the whole team is ejected. I think that is probably peak Bob Uecker in terms of this movie. And I mean, he is hilarious. Like, he by himself always gets some legitimate out loud laughs from me. He's so good because, like, again, I think this movie is kind of a cartoon, and I think he's playing into that a little bit more. So I don't know that he's as good of a baseball announcer, but I think he's really hilarious. And what he says about Parkman as well. And I mean, it's not PC, but when he calls Pedro Serrano a pansy for stretching in right field. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, Bob Uecker is probably my standout performer of this movie.
Yeah, when he's just openly drinking, it's just the most hilarious thing. I can't help but like laugh out loud every time I see him just like passed out. Or it's not even that. It's like at first he's like dressed normally, and then he just gradually stops wearing his shirt and just wears his undershirt, and then he's just like drinking straight out of the bottle. So that was just hilarious. And I keep thinking like this is kind of like him at WrestleMania 3 and then WrestleMania 4. It's just like him. The difference between Bob Uecker at WrestleMania 3 and 4, you can tell he's more animated in 4. He's more excited because of Vanna White, obviously. But it's that difference, and I like how it's like he's more professional in the first movie and he's less professional in this one. But it's all because the team sucks so bad. And I keep wondering, like, they gave us like an idea of what the record was in the first movie. I can't help but think how bad the record was in this one. Like, I don't know. Like, it seems like the first 2 months they had like 5 wins or something, which is utterly ridiculous. I don't even know how they were able to come back after that. Because the comeback in the first movie is really hard to do. That, like I said, that was like a 30
and they
win,
also
10
at one
loss
point
run.
in the movie, they say that they are 61-61. So they're very clearly, they're winning games. I mean, they're not great, but they're at 500. So that's after 122 games, they're 61-61, and then they kind of go on their big run and they win however many games, 20 of 25 or whatever, and that's how they get into a divisional race with the New York Yankees. You don't get that nearly as much in this movie in terms of how bad they are. But, I mean, it seems a little bit more dire, I guess. But maybe the rest of the division is bad, too. Like, maybe they're just in a bad division, and they're able to just kind of get lucky and sneak in at 83 and 79 or whatever and get into the playoffs.
That's what I'm thinking too, and this must have been a down year, man. Because technically, this year was supposed to be the first year to introduce the wild card in '94, but they didn't introduce that concept in the movie, so they're just trying to treating it as if this is like the 1990 season, because the first movie takes place in '89, and they're supposed to be the next season. So that's kind of my interpretation of it. Like this movie actually takes place in 1990 and not 1994. But it's just really interesting how that kind of happened with the change of the divisions and stuff, and then with the strike, it just screwed everything up all completely. And then this idea that I guess Cleveland and Chicago White Sox are not even rivals anymore because of the division switch, because the Guardians went to the Central, so that kind of switched things up.
No, they were not in the same division before '94. And then they got put in the same division because the White Sox used to be.
Oh, that's right. I've got it back.
In the AL, the White Sox used to be in the AL West, and the Cleveland Indians used to be in the AL East, and then they got put in the American League Central Division, and that started in '94. And they remain in the same division for now. Again, I have a feeling the AL thing's going to go away at some point. But for right, yeah, it is. They are both in the same division. In '94, I think was the first year that. Because they were kind of in a divisional race. The Sox had the best record in baseball, but Cleveland was well positioned, I believe, to be one of the first wild card. It would have been, I think, either them or the Yankees to be the wild card in the American League.
For sure. And then August came, and then that all went out the window. So, but then the next year, obviously '95, that's when they went to the World Series. Was it '95 they went against the Braves, and then '97 was against Florida,
Marlins.
Right?
They lost to the NL East twice, and in both cases they choked pretty hard. In '95 they couldn't hit, and in '97 Jose Mesa blew it in the seventh, and Edgar Renteria got his big moment.
Yeah, that's history for you, especially with that Florida team, and they were an expansion team that rose to the ranks in really a short amount of time. So yeah, that's the story.
They bought a World Series essentially because they bought Moises Alou and a whole host of other people. So that's why they were able to get it. And Livan Hernandez also went on kind of the run of a lifetime.
Yeah, that's the history of Cleveland in the '90s for baseball. Of course, we talked about last week with the Cubs. What's interesting about this season is that when at the beginning of the project, me and Jerome had no inclination or clue that the Indians were not the Indians, the Guardians were actually in contention to win their division, and all of a sudden they're like a top team right now. And the interesting part is the day of this recording, they're facing the Dodgers in a series coming up. So we'll see how that goes, because I think that's going to be a real test for Cleveland, more so than the Dodgers, because the Dodgers seem to be okay facing AL teams. It's the NL West teams that they have a lot of struggles with. But I don't know. Let's see if the Guardians this year are legit.
Can I give you an amazing stat? Can I give you an amazing stat about the American League Central?
Go for it.
There are 4 teams in the American League Central that are over 500, right?
Right.
Collectively, the AL Central is 38 games under 500.
Because of the White Sox.
Because the White Sox are that bad.
Oh, my goodness.
Unbelievable. That is unbelievable. 38. Again, 4 teams in the AL Central are above 500, including the 4th place Tigers. The White Sox, at the time of this recording, are dragging them down. And that's another reason you might see 3 AL Central teams in the playoffs, because they've gotten to play extra games against the Sox. And that has certainly helped the Twins and the Royals, especially. But yeah, what do we got next?
Okay, I guess we got to talk about Randy Quaid now, because, look, we don't like the guy personally, obviously, but, I mean, this dude is just so incredible in this role. I mean, look, he's the average fan. Like, I've known these type of fans. I've been this type of fan, right? Where you're just so optimistic at the beginning of the season, shit goes down, and you're just like, oh, garbage. They're going to blow it. And then they get on a run, and then they make the playoffs, and I'm like, they make the playoffs now, but they're not going to go on a run, and they're going to lose, and something bad's going to happen. And that's usually what happens, or something good happens and they win the title or something. Something like that happens as a fan, and I think we've all been there, except Randy Quaid just I don't know, man. He's just so unhinged by the end of it. and then he gets all happy when he sees Wild Thing at the end. So it's just like, okay, man, you're like very like,
I mean, it's the Pavlovian response, right? Like you hear, it's like when wrestling fans hear the final countdown when Bryan Danielson comes out. I mean, it's not the same thing, but like when you hear the music and you see, like he's got the hairdo back and he's got the vest, like that is clearly creating a Pavlovian response.
God, it made me think of that WrestleMania that I think the last WrestleMania I watched back in like 2018, maybe the one where Cena comes out as like old school Cena and the whole crowd pops, and then me and everyone in the viewing party pops, and then we realize, oh wait, this is just a one-time thing. We're not going to get an actual Cena comeback run as like the rapper thug Cena, right? So it's part of that, and I get that Pavlovian response gimmick, and it was really an epic like appearance for that to happen. But the thing with the Charlie Sheen Wild Thing character is that he's got this psychological change about him that really is like out of nowhere. There's nothing that kind of instigated it. By the end of the first movie, you just kind of assume he's just being himself.
The implication is that success has gone to his head and that he is scared to throw his arm out because he wants long-term success.
I guess so. I guess that's the whole point of it. It's just I wish something, I don't know, maybe a flashback to when he was before, like an actual criminal, something to actually show us that. But then we get this more Charlie Sheen focus, and the movie ends up an hour 44 minutes when he can easily make this an hour and 30-minute movie. So that's where I'm like, we could have just cut this Charlie stuff.
Both of his potential girlfriends suck. that's the real problem.
And the
Alice
kids
Judy
are just
and I forget the other actor.
The kids are
they're not good. And the kids do not help either. They are they're bad. So bad.
You could just easily cut that stuff out and make this a 90-minute movie and no one would have said anything else. It's just weird that, like, I don't know. I feel like Wild Things has like the worst season ever. Like, if I were to guess his ERA, I would have said it would have been like at 6.5 runs per game, something like that. And the fact that he's coming out of the bullpen and then he walks the guy just to get to Parkman is like the most insane thing. And then when Bob Uecker's on commentary, he's like, he walks to get to Parkman for I don't know what reason. He's just like, what the fuck are we doing? Dude, if that happened in a real game, dude, if I was the manager, I would be like livid and just be fucking cussing at my player. Just like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, dude, one out and you're walking a guy to load the bases just to prove something? It's like an insane concept that would like never fly in any baseball game.
Yeah, I think that's the other problem is that I think this movie, I mean, the first one stretches credulity. This one just kind of takes it. It takes it to a whole new level. But I mean, that's part of the issue as well. But like, of course, he has to overcome it. But it felt like they had to get there in a really out of place manner. And yeah, trying to think of what else. I love that Rene Russo is in one scene. I want to know how much he got paid for this one scene.
I bet it was an off day from the shoot from Lethal Weapon 3, is my guess. Something like that, because she looks like she's been shooting for Lethal Weapon 3, is all I can say. Because, yeah, that was shot right around, I guess, around this time, or at least close to it, or right after it. But, yeah, and then I like the performance of, God, what's his name? As I just mentioned his name, the catcher, who looks like Sid Vicious, David Keith, as Jack Parkman. Now, have you noticed he kind of has...
Keith David.
Not Keith David, right? And there's an interview coming up that I found online that I still got to send Jerome. But doesn't David Keith have that Sid Justice kind of look to him? And that if you were to like not steroid him up, but give him some more muscle tone and like at this part of his life, and then put some lifts on him.
Is absolutely right, because that's what Sid got. That's Sid Justice for you. Steroid it up. I think David Keith is just playing an asshole. I mean, I think he's pretty good at it, and I think it fits the tone of the movie. I don't know that it would have fit in very well in the first movie, but this is probably either his first or second most famous role. I would say his most famous is Daredevil. Would we agree on that?
I mean, Officer and a Gentleman, like we just reviewed that. That was an incredible performance.
Ooh, yeah. You know what? I apologize. It is definitely Officer and a Gentleman, Daredevil. I mean, those are his three most prominent roles.
For sure. And I think this is like, you need a kind of like the quote unquote heavy villain, quote unquote. For this movie, because the first one didn't really have it. It was more like the encompasses of the Yankees were that villain. In this case, he's the villain. He was on the team originally, gets traded, and the fact that like, and the first home run of the first home run of the season, he doesn't like acknowledge any of his teammates. And I thought that's the coldest thing you can do to isolate yourself and just have so much heat on your team from your team to do that. And I was just thinking, my goodness, here we go. This is the villain. The first time I watched this, I was like, dude, this guy's like a total like dick in this. And I was probably like 8 years old when I watched the second movie. So I knew then that this guy was doing a good job being a heel, and he does a great job at it. And then let's see who came back that I wanted to talk about too. Oh yeah, the owner. What's her name? She passed away.
Margaret Whitten
yeah,
does. I mean, she basically is in like 3 scenes, and she buys his team back and wants them to lose, and of course that's when they start winning. Of course, I mean it's only natural that's what happens.
Yeah, she does a good job in that role, and despite like I don't know, she had more focus on the first movie and a more driven goal this time around is just like I guess revenge. So I think that's why they kind of had to put more of the villain stuff on Jack Parkman for that because she wasn't given the heat that she had in the first movie. So and that's kind of like it. Like Tom Berenger has less to do, but I like him in that manager role. Like that's a natural fit for a player in that.
Yeah, I thought that was. I mean, that was the logical thing to do was to make him the manager and to take out James Gannon for some reason. Although his scenes in the hospital are pretty great. I love this shit. I mean, they moved to England.
Yeah,
This
so
is tough stuff.
the gimmick is that the doctors are forbade him from watch the game because it's going to give him elevated heart issues because he just had a heart attack. So he sneaks in the radio and he's pretending to watch British TV. And this is the funniest shit because he's like talking to the nurse. And he's like, "I love this British shit. I think I'm going to move to England." And yeah, that's my impersonation. But he's still funny. Like him sitting down, like the second half of the movie, he's still effective. I thought that was really well done. The way they transitioned him. Excuse me. And Tom Berenger takes over. And if you look at baseball, like that's kind of what happens to these players. Look at a guy like Dave Roberts, Alex Cora, like these guys that were not superstars, right? But they know the game so well because they're veterans, kind of transitions them into these managerial roles, which is why I think a guy like Mark Pryor, who's on the Dodgers right now, a pitching coach, he just has that look of a manager. I'm not surprised that Mark Pryor has his own team in like 5 years.
I am absolutely stunned that Mark Pryor became a pitching coach. Given how his career turned out, it's pretty amazing to me.
Like I said,
Again,
you don't have to be a superstar.
the thing is, Pryor was supposed to be like the superstar of superstars, and he wilted away because of the injuries. And I mean, I think part of it is his delivery. I think was problematic. I mean, he was very clearly on something too. Just look at his calves, for God's sake. That was always the joke. Like, very clearly was a part of the drug culture in some form or fashion. But yeah, it's amazing to me to see him with the salt and pepper beard and the pitching coach. Although I will say, if the Dodgers do not win the World Series, I have a feeling that he and Dave Roberts are both gone.
I got that feeling too, but I do see him as like carrying his own, almost like a Craig Counsell did. Like I said, it's these guys that are not superstars that end up as like managers. So be aware, like some of these guys, like Justin Turner's another guy that I might consider one day is like maybe if you move into a managerial role, something big can happen for him there because he just knows teams well when he gets to a new team. So there's players like that. So I just wanted to point that out, like, don't give up on some of these like mid-level players that are veterans that seem they're like going to phase out because don't be surprised if they come back in like 5-10 years as these great managers. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of where I'm at and kind of wrap things up on this discussion for Major League 2. I give it like a 5.5 out of 10. You know what I'm saying? Like it's funny, but it's not like hilarious. It does have like really funny moments, but the plot is very much the same as the first, and it's less of an effective like plot line than the first. And that's kind of where I'm at on it.
Yeah, I mean, this movie is a carbon copy of the first one. I think it's fine. I'm probably at a 6 out of 10. I think I like this movie a little bit more than you did, but I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's great. But I think you can watch this movie in like an hour and 10 minutes if you just fast forward through all the Charlie Sheen stuff, which you should absolutely do because it sucks. Yeah, I think this movie is fun, but ultimately a pale copy of the first one, despite the laughs. But we got a double header next month, and what a month it's going to be, Brian. What a month! How are we going to be celebrating the month of October?
Okay, so basically what we're doing for October is that we're just doing all baseball. So we talked about the Ken Burns documentary. We're going to break it down into 3 weeks of reviewing for that. I think how many parts is it? 10 parts, something like that, and even more?
It is 9 innings, and then there is an extra inning. We are only doing any of the documentary material that came out in '94. We are not going over the sequel two parts in from 2010. So we are
That's what I was
just
going to ask too,
reviewing.
because I noticed they added that extra stuff. So we're just sticking to the '94 stuff because we're in that '94 theme anyway, right?
I
30th
mean, again,
anniversary.
we're celebrating. I mean, it's unbelievable that we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of this amidst all the hoopla about baseball in October. So we thought October should just be baseball. We're doing kind of a throwaway gimmick for the right match. We're going to be reviewing an Abe Knuckleball Schwartz match, and we're mainly doing that so that we can just focus on the Ken Burns documentary. So our conversation about the gimmick will be pretty minimal, but again, that is by design because we want to.
We
We're
may
gonna do
change it.
three
I'm going to
things.
try to convince Jerome to change it, maybe, because I just stumbled upon the bat match at Spring Stampede. If you know what I'm
Oh
talking about, it
God,
was
no!
the
Automatic
Giant and
veto
Roddy
on that.
Piper versus Kevin
That is
Nash
a
and Hogan.
veto.
Okay, well,
Veto again.
it's the idea that they're putting a bat up in the air and then that they have to put it on a pole instead of a ladder, which is even more ridiculous. But yeah, that's one of the matches that I thought of in terms of a baseball match. But yeah, so we're going to discuss all baseball all month long. So the double feature at the end of October is going to be the eighth and ninth inning of this project. The eighth inning will be another 1994 movie, Angels in the Outfield, which I have a special place in my heart for that movie because I saw it in theaters. And the ninth inning will be Moneyball, which is kind of like the epitome of all the baseball movies. Like has the most Oscar nominations for a baseball movie. It's the only baseball or one of the few baseball movies to have acting nominations. So it's a really important movie to kind of like close the whole this whole discussion about baseball movies and such. Kind of closes it well with that. So it's going to be an interesting month.
And
I
I
know.
think it's also a partial contributor also to the lessening of baseball's popularity. I'll get into that next week, but the movie's great. I want to emphasize like I love the movie as well. The movie conversation is going to be positive, but we'll definitely kind of step outside of the movie and look at I think why baseball has a very difficult relationship with the concepts presented in Moneyball, but it'll be an interesting conversation. Very excited for the month of October.
Yeah, very, very exciting. Usually we do horror movies, but we switched it up this month because of the whole project with baseball, and it just made more sense. Plus, I think out of the last couple of years, I'm anticipating this year's playoffs more than the last few years because of Otani. So it's going to be an interesting October. By the end of the month, I'm either going to be pulling my hair out or celebrating, and I don't know which one. So that's all up in the air. So we'll find out next month. So that's it for this week, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you for listening.